Hello, I'm David Nielson with David Nielson & Associates. Our topic today is adoption. How can you ensure that we're leveraging the adoption of new behaviors to ensure your implementation success? I'm going to start with a story today. Recently I was working with an organization that was implementing a large technology, a new system called an enterprise resource planning system. And as we began working with this project team, a great deal of the focus was on the technology, the new software. In fact, most of their focus was on that. As we started working with them, our contribution was to help them realize that maybe the biggest part of this implementation success was not going to be whether the software worked, but whether the people actually changed their behavior. And the way that we started attempting to change their mindset was to focus on what we called human objectives. We literally had human objectives workshops to get them focused on what do the behaviors look like that are necessary to support this new software implementation. One of the things to remember, so our topic today, adoption of new behaviors, the smallest unit of measure in any organizational change is a behavior. To ensure return on investment for any change, we have to define and then measure the behaviors which should change for the implementation to be successful. Again, creating adoption readiness fits in the larger context of change management essentials, a framework and a methodology and a tool set which you can use to accelerate the implementation of any project or implementation. A couple of key points we'll cover today. Understanding the adoption journey, that is, what are the phases people must go through? Clearing up the challenge with resistance, understanding it, and helping to manage it better. And then really focusing on, as you are trying to create adoption, reduce resistance, what's the number one skill that's most critical? What are some of our typical barriers? As I travel around working with different organizations, what we find is, number one, many managers in particular see resistance as negative. We have to reframe that in a more neutral term. Secondly, there's no formal process to surface and manage the resistance. This has to be a key part of your project plan. Involvement is not valued. Sometimes we want people to do what we're asking them to do, but we don't involve them in the change. That's a design for disaster. Finally, reinforcement management is not being applied. So as you look at the graphic that we're showing you right now, quick steps or phases to adoption of new behaviors. One, they have to be aware. We work them through awareness with a lot of our communication tactics and techniques. Willingness. We have to get them willing to try the change. Third is the ability. Do they have the ability to succeed? We address that by providing the necessary training and skill development. Motivation. They have to know what's in it for them to actually implement the change back on the job. They have to be motivated to really get in and try it. Finally, we have to build the trust. Now, what we find is if we can work people through those early phases, what we find is usually the case is that we're increasing the trust in leadership, increasing the trust in the change itself. At the very basic level, what we're finding is that they know that this will not do them harm, that the change will work for them. We also teach how you should actually surface and manage the resistance most effectively. I mentioned the number one most important skill. That's where we start in this methodology, and that is you must listen. Listen for the words and the music when you're talking to people who are struggling with a change. Listen. Now you have to demonstrate that you heard. We do that through playing back what the concerns were as demonstrated or as articulated by the individuals. Demonstrate you heard. Play it back. We should acknowledge the individual. There's nothing wrong with their concerns. We should acknowledge that those are concerns that are meaningful and important to them. And then finally, we move to action planning, helping them work through, so what action plans or what steps need to be taken to move them forward. So the three basic things I want to leave with you for improving your success rate with gaining the adoption of people in your organization with any kind of a change. Number one, make sure you know that people know why you're asking them to do what you're asking them to do. Involve them. People will always be more engaged if they are involved in the change that directly impacts them. And finally, show appreciation for them when they do what is expected. Those are three simple steps. I think if you'll give them a try, you'll be more effective in gaining greater levels of adoption and keeping resistance at lower levels. Thanks a lot for your time today.